Hello and welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Today we have got an episode that a lot of you tell me that you like, so I thought I'd give you another one. We are going to do business trend predictions, industry kind of thoughts for 2024 for the year ahead. I'm currently recording this at the end of November, so there may have been things changed until that point, but just so that you have a kind of grasp of when this has been recorded, I've got some things for us to talk about. These are my opinion. I suppose I should mention previously I've got a pretty good track record of hitting pretty much all the predictions. There's not huge trends, to be honest, actually, to talk about. They're more just observations. They're more things to think about. They're things to be mindful of. They're things to lean into. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then hopefully the next few minutes will be worthwhile. I will try and get through them as quick as possible, and we will try and get it all done in one episode. I've got, I think, 22. So, first one, SEO. I think there's going to be a huge focus on SEO again, which is important. It's never gone anywhere. I know for those of you who work in SEO, you're going to be banging your head against the wall saying, yes, this is so important. But the whole idea of search engines and how much that is changing, given TikTok, given even like YouTube, Pinterest, I just think there's a lot of opportunity with SEO, but there's also, I think, people are going to pay a lot more attention to it. People want to come away from social to some degree, or how heavily they rely on it. So I think SEO is going to be a huge, massive thing. Business model wise, I think the agency style business model is still going to continue to grow, but I think it's going to be more agency mixed with consultant paired together. That's more of a it's more of a meaningful partnership, in my opinion, and that's where people tend to see the best results. So I can see that really working well in terms of having consultant and then implementation support. Number three, AI is obviously a huge piece of the pie. I think from a business model perspective, what's going to look really interesting is creating an AI driven product, some sort of like, it might be a SaaS product, but it might also just be some kind of AI thing that's funneling, creating, some sort of tool, and then pairing coaching on top of that. That's going to be a really interesting combination, because ultimately the AI is great to a certain degree. It helps with, again, implementation. It can help with idea generation. It can help with really getting things to life. But then this coaching is the real human piece that really brings them together. And when you pair those two together, you can get a really nice result. And I think that is going to become a lot more popular as we go, particularly for industry leaders who are already on top of this and are already creating stuff, which there's a lot of them are. This will be a really interesting one. In terms of people adding certain revenue streams to their business, I think a lot of people are going to look at corporates and corporate audiences and how do they benefit from the pool of money that does sit within corporates, in terms of whether that's learning and development, whether that's some way of consulting. I think people are really going to, in 2024, think about how do we actually make working with corporates cool, versus just thinking, oh, that's really painful and it takes ages and it's not, worth it. I think people are going to flip that completely. Pricing wise, I think there will continue to be the pricing in the kind of personal development, coaching space, professional coaching, I think is going to continue to fall. But what I mean by that is ultimately the genericness of what people get for the money they're paying. I think the price is going to fall so that it actually matches the value that people are getting. I also think that does mean, though, that the people who are incredible at what they do and who are really industry leading, their price can continue to go up. So I'm not saying that everybody's going to make less money, but I'm just saying that I think because the industry needs a reset and it needs a kind of price, especially from a pricing perspective, of understanding what quality is, or understanding where does value, how do you create value, what does value look like. I think pricing is going to kind of switch to some degree, and we've already seen it this year where people are getting a lot more for their money than they once previously did. So instead of paying £2,000 for a generic, course with a couple of group coaching sessions, it's like people are then getting a lot more for that, or they're paying less but having less deliverables. So I think it's just about everybody kind of reestablishing where they sit in the market. And as I say, there's still a huge potential for lots of people to charge way more money than they're charging now. Don't see that as like I'm saying you've got to lower your prices. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I do think that will be interesting to see as that moves along. Number 6, I think in terms of sales, there is going to be a lot more of a personal sales experience brought back into business, which is really good. We've definitely done this for Q4 this year. And I can see the benefit of it and I can see how it's working. What I mean by that is, how do you essentially add more touch points, but add more touch points that are personalized? So is it around personalized proposals? Is it that sales calls is something that's coming around? You know, are people seeing segmented email campaigns that are specific for them? There's lots of ways that we can look at personalized marketing and sales, but I think that is ultimately going to continue next year because people want that, right? We don't mind being sold to. We don't mind being in a sales process if the process is really good and it's really feeding our sort of questions, desires, queries, uncertainties. What we don't like is when it's just bombarded and it's not specific to us and who we are as a person. Number 7, linking to kind of sales strategies. This is specifically for people who maybe sell sort of education-based things or are in the kind of coach and personal development area. I think we're going to see an increase of people being able to pick bonuses that suit their preferences and their journey and where they're at for specific sort of areas. So what I mean by that is, instead of just being like, here's the bonus that you get for this program, or here's 3 bonuses, I can see a real rise in the desire and the hungriness for people to say, right, well, here's a list of 3 bonuses, or here's a list of 5 bonuses. You can pick 1 or you can pick 2, which feel good for you and what do you want? And I think that will make sense, especially on a large scale launch. So if someone does have, big launches, I think when we look at personalization, how do you do that? As the bigger the launch gets, sometimes that can get really tricky. One of the ways I would say will work very well is to start integrating this choice of bonuses. In terms of content, I believe that short form media is going to continue to rise. I believe everybody's attention span's getting shorter and shorter by the day from TikTok and other platforms. It's inevitable for us to constantly need this dopamine hit. I can't see that going away. I do still think there's a huge need for long form content, big up the podcast and many other, long form pieces of content. But I think short term is that immediate hit that people want. But I think this whole piece on given value is really important. And I think people really do want to look at something for 10 seconds or watch something for 5 seconds and think, wow, I've actually learned something there, or I can go and make that recipe, or I can go and do something that's really going to benefit my life. And I think that's a really interesting anecdote. The other thing from a content perspective, number 9, is around aspirational content. So I believe that aspirational content that is really emotionally connecting with someone is going to continue to rise. It's going to continue to be championed. It's going to continue for people to share it, to save it. That stuff gets people fired up. It accesses a part of their brain and a part of their kind of internal psyche where they're like, oh yes, I do have a dream, or I do want, or it allows people to believe that there's going to be an endpoint, or there's going to be an excitement, or there's going to be something that is worth them, going on a journey of whatever that journey is around the piece of content. So I think that's a really interesting one. I think from a community perspective, number 10, I think more people are going to release kind of like merch or branded goods related to whatever brand they've already built. I think this is a great idea. It's something we've been working on for like 2 years and we still haven't got it out there. We have got it out there for clients and certain people, but in terms of selling it, we haven't got there yet. It is an exciting space. And I think when we look at community and what does community look like in 2024, I would argue it's bringing the in-person or bringing the physical life to the online world. And so how can you're so currently rested on a daily planner that we have, like a May James daily planner, or there's like, the May James pen, if you're watching the podcast. Like, how do we, for some people have built brands that people are really connected to and are loving. I think that is going to be a really nice piece of the puzzle because it's something that, it's not new. It's not that no one's ever done it before. So many people have done it, but I think it's just these trends that are cyclical and they come round. And I think it's probably about time that it does come round again. But I think it's all about how do they get people to feel part of something rather than it just being like an aspirational item that someone wants. Which, like, for us, if we were going to do it, it would be the latter in the sense of it would just be like something that someone wants versus a community. But for some clients I have, and for some people who've got fantastic businesses who have built a community because they have, maybe a membership or they have some sort of group, there is a huge opportunity from a merch perspective to solidify the connection and the whole idea of, retaining clients that can really be helped through this physical merch stuff. From a ads perspective, let's just talk about that. So number 11, I think paid ads and paid media is going to become much more normal to use. And what I mean by that is, like, obviously it's normal, but if you operate in the personal development space, maybe the coaching space, the consultant space, there's a lot of people who champion organic marketing. I definitely do. I'm not against paid marketing at all, but it's, organic is something that I really do sort of champion. The change to next year, I think, is that I think more people are going to be willing to just dip their toe, to try, to see how they go with things, to see what opportunities there is. How does that help their organic campaigns, and how do they blend them together? I think it's huge. This blended approach is really big. It's not a case of one or the other. You can't just choose one or the other, in terms of you can't just choose paid ad. In my opinion, it's not going to work very well. But I think that's going to be an interesting thing as to, like, how many businesses can move forward. And I've already had some really interesting conversations with clients this year towards in Q4 about ads funnels and about what are they building out and how is that going to look for them to test next year. Number 12, I believe in terms of buyer behavior that people are going to continue to buy shortcut products. And what I mean by that is, like, things that help people to do things faster. So templates, short trainings, done for you pieces of the puzzle, things that they can just, like, get, consume and do and use. And I think if you can find a product in your niche that fits with that, I think you can be onto a winner. Some of you will have lots of those already, but you need to just sell them better, or you need to package them differently, or you need to put them forward. And I think people are so hungry for that. We're already seeing it with Black Friday. I'm currently recording this on Black Friday week of November 2023. And we're already seeing, like, what have people chosen to go for, and a lot of people have chosen down the route of a bundle or a package or a template or some kind of, like, done for you piece, because people need, well, it's not done for you, it's more done with you, in the sense of, here's what you need, fill in the gaps. That stuff really works well, and it's something that is really powerful. Number 13 is around office space, which might seem a bit random, but I think for a lot of people this year, they have, because of the whole COVID situation, has been the year that they've then ventured to their office space and they've said, no, we are going to invest in it. We are going to buy some for small businesses. I think as we go through the year next year, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a kind of flip to that, and we see more and more people realizing, is it really worth the investment? Are we actually using it? How many days a week is it? What is the hourly rate of it costing us for the 4 hours we're in there a week, etc., etc. Some of you obviously have office space and you have no choice. You have to have office space for whatever reason. But I think there's a lot of people who are on this thing of, like, do we like working from home? Do you want to have space? How does that all come together? And I think it's a really hard one, because inevitably there's always pros and cons to it. But I personally believe that it's going to be, the whole working from home thing is here to stay, and it's not going to shift. It's too convenient and too productive for people. When I look at product offerings, because I know we've just touched on, I said about shortcut products, I also think we're going to see more implementation focused programs, groups, memberships. Now, this is exciting, because this is pretty much what I for my group stuff is what we kind of do. So Year of Clarity is it's a strategic planning program, but it very much kind of lends itself to people sitting down and doing stuff on the calls that we have. Maze Accelerator is I wouldn't want to say an accountability program, but it is a way for people to get high-level advisory advice constantly, daily, but also hold space for them to actually do the stuff they need to do. What I'm saying is, I think there's going to be more of those come about. This idea that we've constantly got to learn more is going to become quite boring quite quickly. I think a lot of us are already on that wagon and have been pushing it for a few years, but I think it's going to become a lot mainstream. And then when I talk about implementation, I'm even meaning, like, more so just sitting on co-working calls and actually doing the work. And I've got a number of different clients who have got different offerings that essentially help with that. Either it is just like they're selling, saying, look, come and do the work, which I think is great. Or I've got people who have, as part of their offering for a specific thing, it's like, how can I help you with the implementation and creating space to hold people? And I think it's a really fab way of adding value. I think it takes time for people to understand that value, and you are selling to a certain group of people, particularly if you just focus on an implementation program, which I think is a fab idea. But I think if you are definitely selling to a certain niche of people. But I think by the end of the year, that will change, because I think buyer behavior is going to change. And I think the beliefs around what that means and what the value is in it is also going to shift. When we look at learning and we look at, I'm saying we're realizing that we're kind of all burnt out from learning too much and we don't really need to be learning more and more often. What there is always a space for is micro learning. And there's a space for clarity, there's a space for skill development, there's a skill for understanding depth. And that is where this micro learning category is really going to increase, in my opinion. So small targeted problem solving, sort of courses, trainings, workshops versus these huge, massive courses is really going to be popular. So whether that's, you go and spend a day and you consume a whole course in a day, or whether that is that you are literally, it's a 15-minute training that you pay £7 for, but it shows you how to do something that you just will really benefit and add value to your business. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be huge, but I think there's going to be a real shift in that. And we've seen it this year in terms of what I've bought this year. I bought small stuff for specific team members, specific things that people need to then be able to go and do certain things. It's like, I'm happy to buy loads of small things because everybody needs different things. So it's like, how do we upskill everybody? And that is very appealing, I think, to everyone, whether you have a team or whether you don't. Understanding small pieces of the pie, it also can be helpful for them to get your head around, because you're like, I get this. It can be easier to kind of collate together. In terms of another type of offer that you might want to introduce into your business, or maybe you already do and you want to just have some validation and clap your hands that I think it's going to be in demand and is going to be popular, is retreats. I think the idea of retreats, the idea of events, the idea of space basically to get out of your usual environment and into a separate space to achieve a certain thing or goal, I think that's going to be really pleasant. And I think people are going to be very receptive to it. I also think there's a huge opportunity for a lack of price sensitivity. And what I mean by that is, like, I think people are willing to pay a hell of a lot of money for certain types of retreats and certain types of events and certain spaces to be held. People are not sat there thinking it has to be this price, otherwise we won't do it. A lot of people are very flexible in terms of they're happy to pay a high ticket price for that. I think that's a really interesting option. In the kind of idea of what do people want to buy and what is the demand, I think there's number 17 is around, I think there's going to be an increased demand for team plus leader support. And what I mean by that is, if you are an advisor, a consultant, a coach, a mentor, someone who is supporting someone else in an organization or a business or a community or a charity, I think there's a really increased demand from leaders to want to buy something where they don't just benefit, but the whole team do. This excites me because actually we're going to end up with much better outcomes and results if we can get more people involved. Yes, that might mean that cost of things increase, but I think people are willing to see, like, what is the impact and the payoff versus what is the investment. And so what I mean by that is, like, how does everybody get on the same page? How is everybody aligned? We used to have a situation where, a leader, a C-suite, some person, an owner of a business would be coached, and then they have to kind of somewhat translate it to other members of the team, or they kind of have to water it down to some degree. What I'm suggesting is, I think there's going to be a real increase in people wanting to have various different people in their organization together, separate, having a kind of mix match within a package. This is something we've been offering, I've been doing for 2-3 years, where I've allowed it's only in my private one-on-one consultant container, but where I will have multiple different stakeholders from a business, or we'll have really kind of more than just one-on-one person kind of talking with me. And there's various reasons why I decided to do that, but I think it's really going to take off next year, and I think people are going to really want that and think that it's really interesting, because it also means that everybody can benefit, which has to be a good thing. I think people are starting to see the real value of, like, this is not just about me as a leader or the owner or CEO. It's about how do we get everybody on the same page and how do we get everyone bought in and excited. Number 18, in terms of services, I think we're going to see a much more productization of services happen in 2024. What I mean by that is productizing items. So rather than it just being like, this is a program and here's what it is, and here's like one item and this is what you get. People, I think, are going to switch to creating, a lot of the time, a community, but creating a thing that, yes, has deliverables, but it's almost a brand in itself, and it's a very much movement, and it's therefore a product, it's a commodity, rather than it just being like Joe Blogs sells, for example, advisory services. Do you want to spend an hour with them? It's this price. What I'm seeing is, like, let's have some sort of product that is a clear thing. Year of Clarity's somewhat of a good thing, but it's not as productized as it could be. One of our things that we're constantly looking at is, do we productize it further? And this year we've had some really interesting, deep conversations around investors and tech and that sort of thing. And what do I want to do? Ultimately, it's me that's kind of wavering on whether we want to go there. But there's many ways that you can productize certain areas of your business model and what you sell. And I think that's going to increase this year. We've already seen it this year in some people, but I think it's really going to come forward. Number 19, we have got, oh yes, we're going to talk about AI again. So this is really an interesting one. I think AI is really going to be helpful for business owners to just get more volume and more testing to be done. And what I mean by that is like more volume on marketing options, more volume on trying to fill the top of funnel. Filling the top of funnel will forever be the thing that people are, focusing on, working on. And I think AI is really going to allow people to, instead of have one thing running or two things running, to allow to have 4 or 5 different projects ongoing at the same time, testing. And that's exciting because it means more data, and more data means that we've got a better understanding of who we're trying to speak to and why it's not working or why it is working, and how do we make that quicker, faster, smoother, more efficient. So I think there's going to be a real interest of like, how do we use a WhatsApp chatbot, for example, but how do we program it via AI to then be able to talk to someone and move them through some kind of program or support them on a daily basis, but actually it's not, the business owner doesn't even have to do anything because it's all pre-generated through WhatsApp, which isn't new. Like, it's been going for ages, but I just think the speed in which it's going to happen and how much of an issue it is to make that happen is going to be a lot less. I think the whole idea that, last week it was released that you could now create your own sort of GBT and you can start creating your own generative models. I mean, that in itself is fascinating and exciting and scary, and there's various issues with it. I feel very, as a business, we very much lean into AI and we are utilising it in across many different departments, but I can't lie and say that I'm 100% on board, in the sense of I really think the risks of it are huge, and the lack of legislation and governance is really worrying. But in terms of a business perspective, yeah, it is a free-for-all at the minute, and there is a lot of opportunity to really benefit from that, especially for small business owners, because the bigger the organization gets, the harder and the more hoops it is for them to get through and to get these stuff passing through. Whereas for small business owners, like if you're listening to this podcast, there is so much opportunity for you to really run with it. So do explore it and do see, what can you benefit from. 3 more for us to go through. I feel like this is probably the quickest trend predictions we've ever done, but hopefully it's just straight to the point what you wanted to hear. No doubt as soon as I finish record here, I'll be like, oh, here's another 10 that we should have mentioned, but that always happens. So I can always come back with another part 2 maybe in January if there's more things that have cropped up, but here's the final 3. If you are enjoying this, please share on your socials, tag me in them. I love it when people share the episodes or share which bit they kind of enjoy or what episode really resonates with them. Number 20, I believe this should be obvious, but it never is. I believe that in 2024, people will have to really deliver results for whatever they're selling and prove their value. And thank God that this is the case, because it needs to, it needs to be. But I think we're really going to see a thing of, it's not going to get easier to sell your services. It isn't COVID 2020 anymore. It isn't 2008. It isn't when these kind of heydays were there for however long the period of time was. I really believe that we're going to continue to have the issue of, well, it's not an issue. I think it's actually really exciting. I think it's really fun that people can start whittling down people based on, what do they actually provide, and what is the actual value, and what is the takeaway? And rather than everybody being everything to everything, I think this can be a nice reminder for people to really get clear on what they're good at and then push that and sell that. Because when you start selling that, people want to buy it because you're shit hot at what you do and you're really good. That's really attractive and pleasing for people, and it gets people engaged. Whereas when people are just trying to like sell something that they aren't the expert in, or it doesn't make sense for them to do, that's when it becomes really difficult. So I'm kind of excited by this. I think the idea that people need to deliver results and provide their value is going to be very exciting. The idea that people are just regurgitating from one thing to the next about what someone said, and it's just this constant kind of running thing, I think that is going to get really boring really quickly. I mean, lots of us are already bored by it. Number 21 is around personal brands. I think, the rise of the personal brand is going to continue to grow. I think it's hopefully going to be less around a personal brand. I've got like air quotes if you're listening to this. And more so just around like, what do people stand for? What do people do? Why should we know them? Why should we connect with them? What's the point? It can be that simple. I'm not really into this whole idea of making it more complicated than it needs to be, but I do think my point on this, number 21, is around books. I really think books are going to continue to be there. I think people, using a book to build your personal brand is still a solid goer. And I think it will be for a long, long time. There's something really interesting about a book. I think there's many ways to do a book wrong. I think there's many ways to promote it wrong. I think there's many ways that people spend so much time doing a book and then it's an absolute waste of time because it's not actually helping them in a certain way. However, I do believe that a lot of books and people, it's on people's to-dos, it's on people's focus points. And I think if you do it well, that is such a huge asset to your business or your personal brand, depending on how your business is set up, but particularly your personal brand that, can stick with you for a long, long time. So the final point is number 22 of the Trends and Predictions 2024. I really get excited by this one because this is what I love and live and breathe. It's my bread and butter, but I'm really happy to say that I think strategy, paying for strategy across all different areas. It doesn't matter what strategy, business strategy, growth strategy, health strategy, like strategy across every sort of discipline and area. I think people are really coming around to the fact that strategy is the piece that helps people do what they want to do. It's the piece that gets people to have a competitive advantage. It's the piece that allows for fast growth to occur. It's the piece that allows for peace of mind. It allows for happiness. Like everything I can see comes back to strategy. And I think people are starting to see that. I think people are starting to really grasp that and understand that, like, there's no point in you taking shitloads of action if it's not the right action. Likewise, there's no point in just going and executing a strategy but not having any accountability support to actually check in and work out, are you actually going at the right pace? Does it need to change? Is it right? Measuring that. So I think people are willing to pay for strategy now, which they have, some people always have been, but I think previously some people would have been like, I don't get this at all. Why on earth would I do that? I think strategy is going to continue to grow. I also think that does mean that the rise of people claiming to be a strategist or be a strategy consultant or be able to create strategy is also going to rise. And that is exciting, but it's also is slightly worrying because I do think there's a lot of people who will do a course, will do a certification, will just like do something and just magically be like, right, I am now a strategist. And I think for people who are strategists and love strategy in their head will understand and really resonate with this idea that it is such a craft and such a skill to build, and it's something that you really go on a journey with. And again, I'm not saying that people can't do that. Everybody starts somewhere, yeah? Like everybody's constantly just improving. But I think finding a quality strategist or just being in the right place is going to be important. I think that's going to be a key one. Those are my 22 trend predictions and industry kind of pointers for you for 2024. I'd love to know what you think is going to be a trend. Feel free to drop me a message on Instagram and I'd love to chat with you. I will probably do another one of these maybe in the midpoint of next year. But yes, those are my thoughts. We will see. I'm sure there's something happens that we're completely amazed by, no doubt. But take care. Listen to some of the other episodes. If this is the first episode that you've listened to the Honest Business podcast, I'd really suggest that you keep diving through the back catalogue, because we have over 80 episodes now. There's something for you. There's something for everybody. But that is all I've got for you today. Tune in next week. Speak to you soon. Bye.